Hello again. I would like to talk to you today about a concept that doesn't get mentioned much in popular culture today, and or at least as much as it should. This being the concept of legacy. And what I have noticed in finding what I care about in this concept is that specificity matters more than almost anything, because there are a few definitions that I find are completely and totally missing the point of what legacy is. And I generally try to be as specific as I can when trying to give a um, when trying to communicate a complex subject. So I would like to go through a few of the definitions that Merriam Webster has on their current website for the definition of legacy. Um, this is excluding a couple of the definitions that are specific to technology and to finances, but these are the broader definitions that they have. Uh, the first two are noun definitions, and the last is an adjective definition. The first one, the first noun definition that they have is this: a gift by will, especially of money or other personal property. And I think this falls short because it's focused very much on the material aspect of what a legacy is, where it's saying that a gift, usually given by a family member or a very close friend, and saying that no matter what, I want you to have this once I'm gone. To me, that would be inheritance. And making that distinction is less of a subtle one because, again, this is very focused on the material aspect of things, where saying that all a legacy is the money or property that someone owns. And I find that unusable. The second noun that they have is this: something transmitted by or received from an ancestor or predecessor from the past. This, I think, is closer. Something transmitted or received from an ancestor or from the past. Makes sense. Because legacy is always from the past. It has to be based off of the nature of what it is. But I think this falls short as well. What I would call this is birthright, saying that this specific part of legacy is something that's passed down from your ancestors or predecessors, saying that this can only be given to a very special person. and the only way to have it is from the person that has their own legacy. And the last definition, is an adjective, and it goes as this: of, relating to, associated with, or carried over from an earlier time, technology, business, etc. And I think this is further from the last one that I explained, but also closer in a way, because it's more inside the meta space of ideas rather than material. And just simply being carried over from one generation to another. And it also says that it doesn't have to be an individual, it can be a business, technology, whatever it may be. But what I would say this is foundation, as in something is foundational to a field. Einstein was foundational to physics. Um, Newton was also foundational to physics, and both of them left their own ways of doing things. They contradict each other, but they're still both foundations. And I threw in a fourth definition that I am particularly fond of, simply because it's from a story that I've taken great love to, since it um, gave me its graces. And from Lin-Manuel Miranda's Hamilton, uh, he says, "A legacy is planting seeds in a garden you never get to see." And this is entirely in the metaspace of uh, things that won't be understood by most people in a very concrete way, but is still extremely useful to have because it gets us somewhere closer to where we need to be. We plant seeds in a garden we never get to see because that's the way that our society runs. We don't run on things happening only for the here and now. We also have to be thinking of, what does our education system look like? Who is looking after the orphans? And that is also a definition that falls short, but much, much closer. And I also want to give you my currently working definition of legacy, the one that I use in my own life to describe what I mean by legacy. That being the accomplishments and or stories around a person or entity after they've exited an area or field. Again, the accomplishments and or stories around a person or entity after they have exited an area or field. So, breaking that down, accomplishments and or stories. So this could be how someone changed a field where, going back to the example before, Einstein, his legacy is breaking through into a new kind of physics and breaking into a new type of thinking that physics can have. And so that would be part of his legacy would be inside of his accomplishments. But also part of his legacy is the stories that are told about him, where someone might tell the story of how he started out in a post office and did equations there when he was in his 20s. Eh, that on its own is not his legacy either, but both of them put together is his legacy because that's what makes the meaning of someone who has gone. The concrete things that they did for us, and also the way that they made us feel, and what they did to get to those accomplishments. So, going on with the definition. The accomplishments and or stories around a person or entity, meaning that it can be a singular person, a company, or an organization, uh, a husband and wife duo, siblings, whatever, after they have exited an area. You cannot have a legacy while you are still inside an area or field, because that is just stories and accomplishments. The only way that they can come together is after you exit. That's when they become a legacy. And to me, I think we as a culture have focused on the accomplishments part of that definition a lot in the past decades. And what we need to realize again is the stories that we know are out there, where if we know that Einstein came up in uh, Germany during World War One and Two, came to prominence, I mean, that makes his story more special. We care about him more because of that. And by knowing someone's more full story, we can appreciate their legacy more rather than just having it as accomplishments, because that way their legacy dies much, much faster. And it becomes more likely that their accomplishments won't stay. I think that's what's happening with the whole idea around bringing down statues currently, um, where people want to only look at the faults of certain people or anyone, where they see that George Washington held slaves. They see that Abraham Lincoln uh, wasn't just focused on freeing the slaves in the Civil War. They see that Martin Luther King slept around with other women while doing things in different cities. But I think the people who make that argument can't see the forest for the trees. They can't see that while we have these faults that these people made consciously or unconsciously, those people were revolutionary for their time. And being revolutionary for your time is more important than being moral 100% of the time. It's hard for me to say that because morality is a huge part of what motivates me and what corrects what I do. But I think it's the truth because the people we pay attention to were not saints. They did not have foresight beyond hundreds of years. And there's no way for them to have that. But they were revolutionary in the correct direction for the time that they were in. And then on the other side of the spectrum, we also have to recognize that while we see these people as people, we also have to bring their legends down some. George Washington was not a god, nor was Abraham Lincoln, nor was Martin Luther King Jr. They wouldn't want to be remembered as gods. They would want to be remembered as great men. They would want their legacies to be revolutionaries for their time and trendsetters in that they spoke what they saw as the truth, even though it was dangerous. And that's what I believe is more important to see about those people. And also looking at history, is it true that the victors always write history? Because we still have things from Nazi Germany. We still have things from the Soviet Union and Maoist China and all of these people, all of these nations, I should say. And we keep them not because we want to emulate them, but so we remember what not to do. We as the victors of wars, we as the victors of what we see as the present. We must allow our opponents to speak as well. Because if our ideas are truly better than theirs, then our ideas will prevail. It is a longer road. It is a road that is less taken by, but it is much more worth it. Because that way, our children, grandchildren, and great grandchildren don't have to fight the same way that we did. They won't have to shoot each other over what ideology is right. Because it'll be common sense. Because they both have the ability to speak. And so this brings the discussion to a natural point. How does one build a proper legacy? A legacy that would be worth remembering. And an ideology, no. Not an ideology. A philosophy. How does one build a legacy and a philosophy worth remembering? It would be done like this. Step one would be to do something great. And step zero is to become the person that does great things. I say it in that order because we generally see people by what they do. The people who have legacies, we usually see them as what they did or what they accomplished. And we also have to realize that they weren't always those people. It took Abraham Lincoln living in Indiana, in Illinois, and Washington to become the man that he was, to become the person that would sign the Emancipation Proclamation and give the speech at Gettysburg and all of these things. He had to see the things that he saw. There had to be some amount of pain along with that accomplishment. And he had to overcome that pain to then be able to have the chance to show what a great man he was. It's a many multivariate process. But it is just those two steps. And so long as there is a next generation to remember us, those are the only two steps that we need. Another thought would be, should we respect the dead? should we respect people who have positive legacies? To me, if we don't have those people with those positive legacies, if we're not able to tell those stories, then the philosophies, the stories, and the accomplishments that they had will die with them. We have to have legacies. No matter how imperfect people are, there must be something along with them. Which brings the discussion to a point. What do I want my legacy to be? And I've been ruminating on this for years. The accomplishments and stories will have to come later. I'm still a bit young to have had those happen. I think. And I'll expand on things that I would like it to be in the future. But one thing I would like it to be is the idea of hope. When I was becoming the person that I am now, and I'm constantly becoming a different person than I am now. But the lead up until this point, a lot of the time, it was hopeless. And I didn't know how to have hope in dark times. I didn't know how to look for the light. But I think now, after certain things have happened in my life, I think now I'm able to see hope in a much more complete light. And I hope to give that same gift to others as well. I thank you for listening to me, for listening to a part of my story. If I'm still here on this earth, I hope you can be a part of my legacy too. Thank you for listening. And may we go forward, giving ourselves hope.